Most dynasty teams don't fail because of bad trades or bad luck. They fail because they're built wrong from the start. And today we're going to be talking about how to build a dynasty roster the right way so that you can get your team out of the middle and building towards winning championships for many years to come. My name is Caleb and welcome to the Dynasty Edge, where we help you think like a GM so that you can take your teams from rebuilding to contending and winning championships for years and years and years and years. And so today I really want to dive in how do we build that roster in the right way? The worst place to be in Dynasty is in the middle. You don't want to be stuck in the middle year after year. And so I think it's really important to identify what your direction is, what clear direction you want to have for the future so that you know whether you're contending or you should be working towards rebuilding or retooling. And so today we're going to talk about how to get out of that place and go forward. Most teams are actually in the middle. They're not really bad teams. They're not really contenders. And they get emotional attachment to players, and they get emotional attachment to future promise of players, to values, dynasty values of young assets, and they don't make any moves, thus getting them stuck in the middle. And so one of the biggest red flags that you can find is your team constantly drafting from 1.05 to 1.09, like every single year? Are you always in that middle range, never getting elite players, but kind of always getting the same type of player year after year? Are you barely missing the playoffs or just losing in the first round? Those are huge signs that you are stuck in the middle and it's time to get your team revamped, regoing, rebuilt so that you can start getting from rebuilding to contending moving forward. And so you got to decide, when you're figuring this out, are you a bottom team? One of the biggest things for bottom teams is they have to commit to being bad. If you have a bottom team, if you have a horrible team, this is not the time to go out and buy aging vets like Mike Evans or Joe Flacco and trying to get your team going that way. No, you need to commit to actually being bad. Being bad is a strategy in Dynasty so that you can rebuild assets and get your team going towards the future. So don't let these aging vets die on your roster either. If you have aging veterans, trade them, get rid of them. If you've had a Tyreek Hill on IR all year, trade him for something. Get rid of him when he has value so that you can get draft capital back, picks, you can get players or young players to take a swing on, but really start to get rid of these aging vets and don't let young studs die in your roster either. You can instead of letting them kind of build your team and get you out of that 1.01, 1.02, maybe 1.03 range, get rid of those assets so that they're stopping to push you into those middle picks. You want to be drafting at the bottom of the draft or at the top of the draft, at the highest, the best you can get towards a 1.01 so that you can get an elite asset or trade that 1.01 for several assets down the road because that is such a valuable pick to have. And if you're a middle team, you got to decide, are you going to push in or are you going to tear it down? If your team is at the bottom in the middle, or if your team is mainly all veterans and they're older players and they're kind of producing now, like this might be the time to tear it down. Get rid of those players so that you can start to rebuild your roster because sooner or later, when you have those aging veterans on your team, the bottom is going to fall out and it's going to put your team in a horrible position. So figure out where you're at in the middle. Are you at the top? Are you one player away? Are you 5 players away? If you're anything but one player away, you're ready to contend. But if you're like 5 players away, it's time to tear it down. It's time to retool, rebuild, and get your team going in a different direction. And if you stay in the middle, that just guarantees you're going to be in the middle forever. So you have to change something to get a different result. You can't expect to do nothing and get the same result over and over and be like, oh yeah, one day I'll win, but I won't do anything to get myself there. And so you have to change your strategy so that you can get your team going on the road. And if you're a top team, you got to decide, what are you going to do to stay on top? It's okay if you have a contending team. And if you're a contending team, that's a great time to use your assets, use your first round picks to get better players to push in to win a championship, win the money from your league, and do the right thing. And so today, I really, really want to give you some ways to look at this so that you can decide what to do with your players and some ways that people are getting stuck so that you can build your roster in the right way. And so one thing to remember is timelines matter more than individual talent. And what I mean by that is a lot of people get really stuck and waste the assets on their team. And they should be playing those timelines. When a player is on a hot streak, that's a really good time to get value for that player. Likewise, if a player is on a down streak, maybe it's time to either hold them or get rid of them before the bottom really falls out. And so I think it's one big mistake that people make is that they have a bottom team, they draft a really good running back, and they keep that running back on a really bad team. That running back, if you drafted like a Bijan and you're a bottom level team, you need to get rid of Bijan. He's worth, upwards of 3+ first round picks. You can get a haul for Bijan and set your team up to win. You shouldn't be having these players. You get too attached to them. You're like, oh, that's the number one running back in the league. That's going to make my team better. But it doesn't, because you have nothing to surround them with. And so it's really important that you don't get too attached to players, especially running backs, because running backs almost always the last piece that you do in a rebuild. You never want to have running backs be the first piece, because you're not going to take advantage of their most productive time, which is honestly their first, 2 to 3 years in the NFL. That's when it really is going well for most running backs. And then after that is a slow down tier for most running backs. Mixed timelines can also keep teams stuck in this area. And so, if you have those aging vets and you also have a lot of young talent, you want to figure out what direction you're going in. And the biggest thing is having an idea of like, what is my timeline with my team? Where am I at? Assessing where you're at that moment, and then making decisions going forward and really clearing out any of the extra fat on your team, getting rid of veterans, making smart moves, consolidating those veterans for a younger player, doing moves like that. Or if you have a super elite player like Bijan Robinson, maybe you're tearing down into a lesser player that has value, but isn't quite like Bijan, but has similar production. A really smart move this year would have been trading Bijan Robinson for Devon Achane and a first. That would have been a really, really smart move, because Achane was doing, producing at a Bijan level, but not, didn't have the same value that Bijan has. And so making moves like that is really, really good. And so if your timeline is messed up, if you're just constantly just turning and grinding your roster, adding veterans, adding young players, you're going to be stuck in the middle. Get to a place where you're having all young players, or you're just at the very bottom and you can build it however you want to build it. That's going to set yourself up in the best possible way. And so the next section is building around foundational assets, not weekly scoring. And so I think that a lot of rebuilding teams, when you're rebuilding and building out your dynasty team, a lot of people will build it on who's scoring the most points right now and all that. And that's great if you're a contender, but if you're somebody that's stuck in the middle and you're somebody that's on a rebuilding team, you want to build your team around foundational assets like a Justin Jefferson, like a Jamar Chase, like a Jackson Smith and Jigba, somebody like that you can know will have value for years to come, but is a foundational piece to your team. You don't want to have, a bunch of aging veterans and that. You want to have young foundational pieces. You want to have elite young quarterbacks. You want to have a Drake May, a Jaden Daniels. You want to have Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes. You want to have players like that, elite quarterbacks on your team. Then you want to have young, elite wide receivers, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Jackson Smith and Jigba. If you took hold of him, George Pickens, somebody like that is great to have on your team. That's a great foundational piece. And then elite young tight ends, Harold Fannin. You're going to go with Brock Bowers, Tyler Warren. Those types of players are great players to build upon if you have them, or if you've drafted them, or if you've taken two veterans that are scoring really well and going and trading for one of those players. That's a great way to move on them. Maybe they're having a bad week and you decide to go take advantage of that. Recently Rashee Rice went on to the IR, and that was a great opportunity in your leagues to go and trade a producing player, maybe a little bit more draft capital, for a Rashee Rice while he was at his lowest value. And it might still be a good point to do that, because people don't know what his future holds with that injury. And so buying injured players at a lower value is a great way to rebuild your team, get it going in the right direction, and helping them. So maybe you want to, flip your players into insulated assets. Like I was saying earlier, you take a Bijan and trade into an Achane and a first round pick. Or maybe you want to take a CeeDee Lamb and trade into a Garrett Wilson and 2 first-round picks. Garrett Wilson has a lot of promise. He's a great young wide receiver. He doesn't have a good quarterback right now, and so he's at a lower value, but he has elite talent, and you can get 2 first-round picks. I did several of those trades last year in my leagues on my rebuilding teams to get more assets and trade a high-end player like that. You can do it. You just got to find the right deal and grind for those deals. You want to look for players. So if you're going to tier down to a player that has insulated value, like a Garrett Wilson, you're going to want to find players like that are scoring similarly to the higher end players, like a Jamar Chase, like a Jackson Smith and Jigba. You want to find somebody that's scoring like them, maybe not the exact same way, but scoring, closer to them. Maybe Jackson Smith and Jigba scoring at 21 points per game. You might want to find a receiver that's scoring at like 18 points per game, but doesn't have the same cost as a Jackson Smith and Jigba, and then tier down from Jackson Smith and Jigba and get more assets on the back end. That is a great way to take advantage of the higher ranked player to help boost your team and get more assets to have on your team and to build that foundation. Remember, you have to build out before you build up on your team. And so sell windows to take advantage of. So if you're trying to make these moves, you're trying to build your roster, you're trying to get young quarterbacks, young wide receivers, and young tight ends to build a foundation on, ways to build on that. So times to take advantage of are big games. So somebody has a big game and you want to tear down from them after they've had a big game. Find another player that had a lower game, that had a bad game, and then trade for that player that had the bad game. You'll find that people are going to ride those high scoring weeks far more than you can even imagine. There's so many deals to be made on the performance of players, and getting those foundational assets is easier when you're seeing those up and down weeks. You could have sold Brock Bowers last year after that 65-point game for 3.5 firsts. After that, maybe he was only worth 2 firsts. He was harder to move at the end of the year because he was so valuable but not producing like a valuable player. And so finding trend spikes, maybe somebody just got traded. Maybe they're finding a new team in the free agency. So free agency is coming up in March. And so taking note of what players are moving, keeping an eye on players like Breece Hall that are going to possibly be trading teams. Maybe a George Pickens goes to a different team. And so trading for those players before they hit free agency is a great time to take advantage of a possible value spike. And so keeping eye of contracts, who's signing a big contract, who is not signing a contract, becoming a free agent is going to help your team so much and really set you up for the future. I want to also talk about how draft picks are tools and they're not just trophies. I think sometimes people go, hey, I have like 9 first-round picks and I have 9 second-round picks and 30 third-round picks. That's great, but how are you using those picks to help you in your rebuild? And the best time to acquire picks, if you're somebody that wants to go out and get picks for your team, you're going to want to do it during the season and when contenders are chasing titles. That's a great way to decide you're going to do your rebuild. You've missed the playoffs. It's time to go down to the bottom. Try to go for that 1.01. And so you start trading off your players to those contenders. If your team is in a no trade deadline league, you can make moves all the way up until the championship game. If you have a trade deadline, be active on the deadline to make moves to set yourself up for success and also see if those contenders want to make a deal for you. I think that draft picks can really help a team as long as you have a strategy for how you're going to use them. I would not draft all the players with your picks. If you have 5 first-round picks in a single draft, you're going to want to try to move some of those picks when you can so that you can get players at a similar value, because people are going to go crazy on draft night. They want to draft their player. They're going to go after him. They're my guy. And so holding onto those picks and then trading them at opportune times will net you big returns. And so having a strategy with that. Middle teams often overpay because they think they're close within contending. And so you might find some value too when trading for picks, finding those middle teams that think they're contending, those people that haven't figured out that they're always stuck in the middle, and taking advantage of those opportunities. In one of my leagues, I traded for a couple first round picks of teams that were on the bottom. I looked at their roster and I'm like, hey, I'm going to offer them one of my better players that I kind of want to get off of because they're aging and they're not good for a rebuild. And I just offered them for their first or a first and second and got great value. And then those teams ended up at the 1.06. So I got a great value for my player and I was able to get rid of them at the right moment. And so making those plays can really, really help you make those decisions. Another way to take advantage of a player who had a really good season is in the offseason, hey, pump them up. Hey, I think this dude's going to be a top 2 wide receiver next year. And so you can trade away those players at a high value, or somebody had a bad year or was injured all year. You can go take advantage of their value dip so that it can benefit your team. And so keep in mind all of these things. These are all ways to strategize and get your roster where you want it to go. And so you always want to build into the foundation. You always want to be finding values in your league and ways to find them throughout the league. And so I just want you to keep in mind of that when building your roster. Always look for value, always look for ways to either sell, buy, and find those windows to make opportunities so that your team can be benefited the most for the long term. And that goes for contenders, rebuilders, and retoolers as you are building out your roster. Some common mistakes people do is they hoard picks without a plan. They don't know what they're going to do with their picks. They just have a ton of picks, and then they end up being forced to use them and don't. What if you just pick the wrong players? What if one season you have those picks and you pick the wrong ones? What happens? And so having a plan, having a way that you're going to be able to use them. Rookie hype traps. There's players that are super hyped up and then don't do well. Ashton Genty was a big one. A lot of people went out and got Ashton Genty. He kind of had a bad year. He spiked up at the end of the year, which was really great. But he kind of had a bad year. And so people really bought into that, and then they get hurt. And so be wary of always drafting players. Always look for value. Find ways. Use resources like Keep Trade Cut. Dynasty Daddy is a great resource for you to plug in your team. You can go on their website, plug in your team, and it'll help you find values for your team and trades that you could possibly make with other teams and really know if you're going to get the value in return. Picks are tools, not trophies. So remember that. And, hoarding picks without a plan can really stall your team. One other thing to remember is we're not trying to build our teams up right away. We're not trying to go super into, when we're rebuilding, into elite assets immediately. You want to build out before you build up. And depth and optionality win over time. So when you have more options and when you have more depth, whether that's a lot of pick depth, whether that's a lot of young players, when you have a lot of options, that's going to help you win over time. When you're just picking players that have the option of gaining in value, that's going to really set your team up for the win. Depth doesn't always mean having elite backups to your backups. You don't want to have elite backups. You want to make your decisions to start really easy, and then you want to have backups that you can plug in when you want, and also options. If somebody else needs a running back and you have a great backup running back, you can get value oftentimes more than they're worth for that player. And so finding usable players at every position for your roster. There's a lot of strategies on how to build out your team. Some people like Scott Connor with Destination Devi uses a strategy called any quarterback on a 2 deep. So that is holding quarterbacks on your team, any quarterback that is either a starter or a backup, just grabbing in a bunch of those quarterbacks in case somebody else's quarterbacks go down. That's a way that you can have value because there's a lot of quarterbacks that go down. I believe in 2024, there was over 60 quarterbacks that started that season. So if you had some of those backups that got to start, you were able to get value for those players. And that's a great strategy to have. There are multiple strategies that you can use with that. There's a strategy of called every running back on a roster. Basically, any running back who is on an active roster is a great strategy to hold because running back injuries happen and you can have those backups for when those injuries happen and you can get value for your team. You can get a start, but you can also use those as trades for other people. I think some things to really learn is that you can build a top-heavy team that can work, but you also want to build out depth. So don't just build all elite assets. That was one mistake I made last year is I had this team that had every major wide receiver on that team. And as soon as injuries or as soon as those players didn't have a good season, there were some big names that did not have a good season. My team struggled. And I had to go into a rebuild and completely gut that roster because there was zero depth behind it and I had no picks. So I had no option but to go into a rebuild to help build that team up and not be stuck in that position again. I think that there's so much variance and things to realize, like injuries happen. You can't prevent that. And so setting up your team depth-wise so that you can sustain injuries. If you're a contending team, if you're a rebuilding team, that doesn't matter as much, but having options for other people is a great way to set up your team for success and have a good option so that your team has depth to be able to trade away and get value. You know, if you just fill your team with quarterbacks and running backs, you're going to find so many options to be able to trade when there are injuries in the NFL. And that's what I do in a lot of my rebuilding teams. I grab up as many backup and quarterbacks and backup running backs on my roster so I'm ready to send out trades as soon as there is an injury on any team. And I've gotten so many picks just sending those things out to help other rosters. And even you can grab up, wide receiver is a little bit harder in those ranges. It's very hard to predict, but tight end, sometimes if you have a starting tight end or multiple of those are great assets to go and send out, especially in a tight end premium league to build out your roster as well. And so I really want you to keep these things in mind. Don't build a fragile team. Don't build a top-heavy team. Don't build a team that's full of aging vets. You want to build a good foundation, build out before you build up so that you can sustain injuries, you can sustain variance, you can help your team win when you need to win in your position, or you can help your team rebuild when it needs to rebuild. So keep that in mind as you build your team. I think that another thing to really keep in mind is know your league rules, know your league scoring, and be able to build your team according to the league scoring and the league rules so that you can be best set up. Don't be ignorant of what your league is set up for, and then set your team up for the best thing of that. You really want to be mindful of those things so that you can be in the best position for your team to win in this way. And if you build with direction, if you build in a smart way, if you go after foundational assets, if you trade down when you need to, if you take advantage of value spikes and value dips, if you stay active with intentionality in your leagues, you will win. You will build the team that you want. You will go forward in the direction that you want to go in your league, and you will start to win championships. Take advantage, be active, and you'll find that your teams start to really competing even in a rebuild sooner than you might think. If this video was helpful for you in any way, I'd love for you to subscribe. Comment down below what was helpful, what strategies are you going to build or use to build your team in the future. And I'd love to know what kind of videos you'd like to see in the future. And I can't wait to drop more videos for you guys in the future.